We live in an age that is marked by profound and widespread unsettlement of soul. The fundamental truths of religion that warmed the hearts and illuminated the faces of the parents seem to possess little comfort and hope for their children. The great moral assertions of the past, upon whose solid rocks countless generations stood, seem to afford no firm footing, no sense of security to many a searching heart today. Religious ideals, social institutions, hitherto deemed of unquestionable validity and value, are viewed today with calm distrust and scrutinized with pitiless precision. Nothing is accepted as fixed and final, nothing as certain and of transcendent importance. A fearful flood of skepticism has swept over the modern world, unhinging many a tossed and troubled mind, leaving it bewildered and stranded hopelessly adrift, with no interest to defend, no sufficient object for its enthusiasm, no attachment for its reverence, nothing to tie to but itself and its own melancholy discontent. This was how Rabbi Israel Batan began his sermon on January 5th in 1924 in Cincinnati. He was speaking to a room of rabbis and rabbinical students as their professor of Midrash and homiletics. Homiletics is sermon giving. Dr. Batan was known for exploding verbal fireworks as he taught students how to mine deep into the meaning of ancient text. He taught students to take our people's creativity thousands of years old, chronicling the then urgent confrontation between godliness, peoplehood, and modernity, how to hold it in their hands, compressing it against the assumptions of the moment in order to create everlasting gems. These crystals provided new prisms for the Jews of that time to see through and to understand their world. It is a fine art to unearth pearls of wisdom amongst the muck of our world in a way that each listener can take said pearl and pocket it, to take it home with them and share with their family, seeing how when they hold up that pearl outside of this chapel, its light still reflects the world around each of us in a different way. Each sermon, each teaching, each midrash is a timepiece, a portal to another world, a time a text was unearthed and allowed to illuminate the world around it. When I look to my library, I see portals to different worlds, to different times. When I read through the midrashim, the collections of interpretation on our text, when I see Rashi and Nachmanides, I see portals into the Middle Ages, into the year 1000 with Rashi, the 11th or 12th centuries with Midrash Rabbah, the 1200s with Nachmanides, and I see their world reflected back at me through the text. When Rashi sees Balaam's prophecy, when he says about the Jewish people, "For from their beginning I see them as mountain peaks, and I behold them as hills. This is a nation that will dwell alone, and will not be reckoned among the nations. Hen Am Levadad Yishkon. This is a nation that will dwell alone." He reads the world around him as being threatening to the Jewish people, and seeing a Jewish people who dwells alone, yet has a hope for supremacy against their neighbors. He writes, "This is the legacy of our forefathers, gained for us to dwell alone. We are a nation that alone is destined to inherit the world." In my library, I can also look to the writings of the Hasidic masters, recorded by their students and kept alive for modern study. To pull one of their teachings off the wall is to delve into a world of insular mysticism. Rabbi Yitzchak Levi of Berdichev reads in this story a battle for the souls of converts to Judaism. There is a subtext hidden inside of our scroll of picking up and nurturing fallen sparks. And Rabbi Yitzchak Levi is concerned about the trustworthiness and the ability to retain those converts to Judaism. A theme that is in this text and very relevant to his context in the 17 and early 1800s. As a side note, this morning I heard speaking from the convention in London, Rabbi Danny Friedlander, who says that at the WZO, the World Zionist Organization meetings recently, the WZO did a study which talks about converts to Judaism and talks about the number of people who want to convert to Judaism. And in the recent demographic studies, there are now hundreds of thousands of people in the world today who would like to join the Jewish people on our destiny and on our path, if only we would open the door to them, and let them into our synagogues around the world. As Rabbi Splansky teaches our B'nai Mitzvah students, crafting of Devar Torah is inviting all of these great teachers to our table and entering into a conversation with them. It is wonderful to have these medieval teachers, to have Nechama Leibovitz, to have the Hasidic masters and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs at our table. But when I look around my library, inside of old volumes to bring ever new voices to the table, where are the teachers of my teachers? Where is David Einhorn, who had to escape as a fugitive in the middle of the night from Baltimore in the 1860s, as he preached against human bondage, whips and chains in a slave state, as the country was descending into civil war, blood soon soaking the path that he journeyed up to a new reform pulpit? Where are the teachings of Isaac Mayer Wise, who founded our movement's organizations in America and here in Canada? Of Abba Hillel Silver, Stephen S. Wise, and Judah Magnus, reform rabbis all, without whom the path to that Israeli flag might not have been possible. Of Sadie American, Hannah Solomon, Ray Frank, the woman rabbi of the American West, Henrietta Zold, or any other of the women who would have been rabbis had they been born today. 2 weeks ago, I was in Cincinnati with Rabbi Splansky's cousin, my classmate, Rabbi Ari Lorge, and from microfiche of the 1890s Reform Advocate to handwritten fountain pen smudged sermons on the back of creased stationery, from German delivered in the 1850s to pulpits across North America, to the 1930s publications of the Tract Commission of the UAHC as our movement grew, from Jacob Rader Marcus's Publication Center at the Rabbinical School's Clow Library, to the Jacob Rader Marcus Center for the American Jewish Archives, which have found the priceless productions and have kept these priceless productions of sweat, ink, tears, and thought, which the teachers of our teachers' teachers struggled to produce week after week, some on both Saturday and on Sunday, as out of their mouths and their pens poured the foundations of today's Reform Judaism. In some sermons, you hear political polemics that tickle our fancy or soothe our souls. In others, you find the timeless morals of our movement. Rabbi Emil G. Hirsch of Chicago saw in the prophet Balaam a paradigm for a way we could welcome all religions and the knowledge of all religions into teaching us wisdom. Rabbi Kaufman Kohler of New York in 1887 saw Balaam as the sign that all nationalities have worth. He writes, "Behold, alongside of Abraham, the pious heathen Job, alongside Moses, the Hebrew lawgiver, also Balaam, the heathen prophet, with his glorious message from the same God. Walk through the Jewish gallery of sages, and you will find the great heathen philosophers in company of the lofty Jewish masters, and among illustrious examples of virtue, heathen nobleness of conduct, recorded no less than Jewish. And when the portals of the temple for worship are swung open, the Gentiles are bidden to join the Jews. For my house shall be a house of prayer for all the nations, is inscribed there in letters of fire." And Kohler learned too from his father-in-law, from one of the founders of American Reform and Canadian Reform theology, of all North American Reform prayer books, David Einhorn. In 1856, Baltimore, commenting on the same verse as did Rashi, that we will always be a people apart, he teaches, yes, we Jews are different, and we Jews will remain distinct, but this strangeness we have inherited is a divine gift, the means of all of humanity's salvation. It is the longing for our great task that keeps us separate. Our great task is to bring humanity to a point of unity. And how is Balaam the prophet able to see this? He's able to see this because he climbs up to the great heights. As we soon celebrate Canada Day, I'll be remiss if I didn't mention another teaching of David Einhorn's, preached on the 4th of July in the midst of the American Civil War. In it, he sees hope in Judaism and a lesson for the country around him. He says, if in the time of the Second Temple, the stranger acknowledged the principles of the country then would open its heart to him and regard him as an equal despite his foreign birth. Now, when a spirit of liberty reigns, there the narrow-mindedness that boasts of a nobility by birth must disappear, and men cannot be judged. And I'm sure he includes women when he says men. And men cannot be judged by the side of the ocean on the side of the border on which they were born. This is our inheritance. This is the legacy of our teachers passed down for us to use and to cherish. These teachings are the foundation of our thought that are meant to support us. I want to leave us with two different thoughts. First, remember that I mentioned about a half hour ago the famous Zionist and Reform Rabbi Judah Magnus, who preached from the same pulpit as Kaufman Kohler in New York. Well, he helped start a small, insignificant institution that now is the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And we are bringing the Hebrew University's adult education program here to Toronto, the Florence Melton School, with our best teachers, Rabbi Splansky and Rabbi Sachs, as the faculty. These courses are appropriate for anyone sitting here today and for many others, so let your friends know about it too. Even if you're not Jewish. So, please keep your eyes open for the materials from the Florence Melton School, which will provide for veterans and for new learners a new insight into your Judaism, the foundations of Jewish experience. And also, speaking of Balaam, who climbed to that hill to give his prophecy, this is a theme which Israel Batan, the homiletics professor who taught our earlier Reform rabbis, who taught our rabbis, Brickner and Eisendrath, took as a moral lesson for other prophets as well. As he asked our preachers to be prophets, he asked that they always remain on a hill looking down. In Canada, that we remain from the north, setting our eyes on the world to the south of us. And that when we look down and we look at ourselves, we remain open. He says we must never shrink from seeing things as they really are, never lose sight of the wide gulf that separates the real from the ideal. Our patient spirit preserves us from the canker of despair and from the folly of futile rage. Passionately yearning for a clearer perception of the truth, we seek to sharpen the tools of our search by constant exposure to the friction of active life, and to widen the range of our vision by steady ascent to the high places of experience. Let such openness of mind, such mental alertness, with spiritual patience be ours, and the half-developed wisdom of others will no longer choke up our brains and deaden our souls. From the work we have to do, we too must learn to distill an essence that will purge and illumine our minds for a more complete, more penetrating understanding of reality. And from the lofty heights of life, we too must endeavor to capture a vision of the totality of experience that will liberate and enlarge our thoughts for the contemplation of the broader aspects of truth. We must remain on the height, aspiring not for certainty, he teaches, but rather to learn to live in ambiguity, not for a uniqueness which pulls us apart, but rather uniqueness of mission, which is a mission of openness. Modern Judaism is an open Judaism. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How great are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. Tents which face in, yet are like Abraham's tents, and are open to welcome in those Jewish and non-Jewish who want to come and learn ambiguity, come and learn that there isn't always truth, but rather something we should look for and seek for. As Rabbi Lorge and I continue to unearth these gems, we will share them with our communities, he at Central Synagogue, and I, of course, here at Holy Blossom. We pray that the sermons, that these gems, help us find new meaning in Old Text, and help us find new meaning, too, in our lives. Shabbat Shalom.